What if we created hybrid human animals? It begins with a headline so strange, so unbelievable, that half the world assumes it's a hoax. First human-animal hybrid born. At first, the image on the screen looks like an ordinary newborn, small, swaddled, fragile. But then the camera zooms in. The eyes are not the familiar soft brown or blue of a human baby. They shimmer gold, flecked with an almost metallic sheen, the irises subtly elongated like a predator's. The news spreads in seconds. Across every continent, living rooms and smartphones are lit with the same image, a child with faint patterns on its skin, as if nature herself had painted traces of a leopard's coat across human flesh. Some viewers recoil in shock, others lean closer, fascinated. Religious leaders denounce the event as a violation of the natural order. Bioethics councils scramble to convene emergency meetings. Billionaires call their advisors to discuss investment opportunities. For centuries, such beings lived only in the pages of myth, centaurs galloping across ancient Greek pottery, mermaids haunting sailors' dreams, werewolves lurking in moonlit folklore. These were symbols, not living organisms, stories to inspire or terrify, but never to be held in one's arms. Now the impossible has crossed into reality, and reality has no pause button. The infant is not the product of some forbidden romance between man and beast, as conspiracy theorists rush to claim. It is the result of deliberate, calculated science, an experiment years in the making, hidden behind corporate secrecy and locked laboratory doors. A team of geneticists, working under a project known only as Chimera, has taken the precision of CRISPR gene editing and the control of artificial womb technology to create something entirely new. A genome that blends human intelligence with select traits from the animal kingdom. And yet, in this moment, the science is irrelevant. What matters is the shockwave this birth sends through our sense of identity. Are we still alone as the only truly sentient species? If we can design a being with sharper instincts, greater agility, and senses beyond our reach, what does that make us? Pioneers of evolution, or trespassers in a domain we were never meant to enter? The child cannot answer. It sleeps, unaware that its very existence has split the world into wonder and fear. But its birth marks the first crack in a wall that has stood for millions of years, the barrier between human and everything else. And once a crack appears, it never stays small for long. Before the birth of the Chimera child, the world was already standing on a technological knife's edge. For decades, breakthroughs in genetics had been pushing the limits of what we considered possible. In the early 21st century, CRISPR-Cas9 gave scientists a pair of molecular scissors sharp enough to cut and paste DNA with astonishing accuracy. By the 1930s, AI-assisted protein design allowed researchers to simulate millions of genetic variations in days instead of decades, turning biology into a programmable language. At first, these advances carried a noble mission. We targeted hereditary diseases, re-engineered crops to withstand drought, and revived endangered species from the brink of extinction. Medical journals overflowed with reports of miracle cures. Patients with once terminal illnesses walked out of hospitals. The idea of fixing nature seemed not only possible, but inevitable. Yet history has shown that once humanity unlocks a new tool, it will always find uses beyond the original purpose. Quietly, in labs funded by private investors and shielded from public oversight, experiments took on a more ambitious goal. Not just healing life, but improving it. Scientists began mapping the genetic blueprints of the most extraordinary abilities in the animal kingdom, the infrared vision of certain snakes, the muscle density of chimpanzees, the oxygen storage of whales, and imagining how they might be integrated into human DNA. Society, for its part, was primed for disruption. Climate change had reshaped coastlines and destroyed farmlands. Mass extinction events erased species faster than conservation efforts could save them. Entire regions became inhospitable to traditional human life. The idea of creating beings better suited to survive these extremes began as a fringe concept in futurist circles. But as conditions worsened, it found its way into mainstream debate. Legally, most countries maintained strict bans on germline editing, the type of genetic modification that alters embryos before birth. But enforcement was patchy, and the global biotech black market thrived in the shadows. Rumors of designer pets with unsettling intelligence or experimental soldiers with enhanced reflexes circulated in the darker corners of the internet. Officially, they were dismissed as conspiracy theories. Unofficially, they were warning signs. The birth of the first hybrid didn't happen in a vacuum. It was the result of a slow, steady march toward a line we had convinced ourselves we would never cross, until crossing it became the next logical step. And when that step was finally taken, the world's moral compass began to spin without direction. It happens quietly at first. No official announcement, no government briefing, no corporate press release, just a grainy, 2-minute video leaked onto an obscure biotech forum. In the clip, a figure in a sterile white suit holds a newborn in a silver thermal blanket. The baby blinks, and for a fraction of a second, its pupils contract vertically, like a cat's. The scientist extends a finger. The infant grips it with a strength so fierce that the gloved hand visibly tenses. Within hours, the footage goes viral. Newsrooms scramble to verify its authenticity, but by then, the internet has already decided this is real. The hashtag #ChimeraChild rockets to the top of every social platform. Some users post heart emojis, calling it a miracle of evolution. Others react with horror, branding it an abomination. Governments demand answers. Leaked documents soon reveal the project's name: Helixus Industries, Hybrid Genome Initiative. A day later, the company's CEO appears on live television, framed by the polished steel and glass of their corporate headquarters. With the poise of someone who has rehearsed every word, she explains that the child is the product of integrated genomic enhancement, a blending of human DNA with select animal traits chosen for environmental adaptability, disease resistance, and sensory augmentation. The framing is deliberate. This is not presented as a stunt, but as a solution. In a world battered by rising seas, collapsing ecosystems, and unbreathable air in certain regions, Helixus argues that hybrids could inherit traits allowing them to thrive where unmodified humans cannot. Aquatic adaptations for surviving coastal floods, high-altitude physiology for living above polluted lowlands, enhanced immune systems for resisting the new pathogens emerging from climate-driven habitat shifts. But the speech does little to calm the storm. Religious leaders denounce the creation as a violation of divine boundaries. Political commentators frame it as the start of a genetic arms race. Protesters gather outside Helixus facilities, holding signs that read, "You're playing God," and "Humans are not experiments." Meanwhile, in private boardrooms, investors and military advisors see something entirely different: the proof that a new kind of being is possible, and that whoever controls this technology could control the future. And so, with one child's cry, humanity crosses a threshold it can never uncross. The question is no longer if hybrids can exist, it's what will happen now that they do. The birth of the chimera child doesn't just capture headlines, it reshapes them. For weeks, no other news story can compete. Talk shows, late-night comedians, and global summits all circle back to the same question: what does this mean for humanity? Within months, the ripple effects are visible everywhere. Venture capital flows into hybrid research startups at a pace unseen since the dawn of the internet age. Competing biotech firms announce breakthroughs of their own, though none provide proof as compelling as Helixus. The stock prices of gene-editing companies soar, while social media erupts with speculative lists of the next animal traits to be humanized. At street level, curiosity battles with fear. Families argue over dinner tables about whether hybrids should be integrated into society or kept under controlled observation. Religious congregations host sermons warning of the age of engineered temptation. On playgrounds, parents whisper about the possibility that their child's future classmates might not be fully human. In the corporate world, the conversation shifts from ethics to economics. Logistics companies imagine delivery crews with the stamina of sled dogs. Mining corporations fantasize about workers with the night vision of owls. Oceanic research firms openly propose breeding hybrids with the lung capacity of seals, eliminating the need for expensive diving gear. Military strategists, more quietly, explore the concept of soldiers who can track scents, scale walls without equipment, or heal faster than any human currently can. For now, such applications remain speculative, but the mere possibility begins to distort markets and political priorities. Nations with advanced biotech sectors subtly adjust immigration policies to attract hybrid scientists. Meanwhile, countries with strict genetic laws find themselves torn between moral principles and the fear of falling behind in a new evolutionary race. Public opinion is split, and deeply so. Supporters hail hybrids as the next step in human progress, an insurance policy against extinction in an unstable climate. Detractors warn of irreversible consequences: the spread of genetic errors, the creation of a permanent underclass, or the loss of what it even means to be human. And beneath all the noise, a quieter shift takes place. In elite circles, whispers grow about the black market services already offering custom conception for wealthy parents willing to ignore laws. The first hybrid was a scientific milestone. The second, some suspect, will be a luxury product. 10 years after the chimera child's birth, the hybrid generation has come of age, and the world feels both familiar and unrecognizable. Once a rare curiosity, hybrids are now a small but visible part of everyday life. In major cities, it's not unusual to see a teenager with the golden eyes of a hawk or the elongated stride of a cheetah. In coastal towns, amphibious hybrids work as lifeguards and marine researchers, effortlessly diving to depths that no unmodified human could survive. Physically, their advantages are undeniable. They run faster, see farther, and shrug off illnesses that still send humans to hospital beds. Yet it's the neurological differences that spark the fiercest debate. Brain imaging shows that certain hybrids process information more rapidly, with enhanced pattern recognition and memory retention. In some cases, their sensory input is so rich that they describe colors no human can perceive, or detect faint electrical signals in the air, like migratory birds navigating the planet's magnetic field. These differences begin to reshape society in ways no policy can fully control. In the workforce, hybrids dominate certain industries, leading to subtle, and sometimes not so subtle, resentment. Unions in traditional human sectors demand hiring quotas, accusing companies of replacing humans with bio-optimized labor. At the same time, hybrid advocacy groups campaign for full equality, pointing out that they were created without consent and should not be treated as tools. Social divisions harden. Dating apps quietly introduce genetic status filters. Elite private schools either compete to enroll hybrids for prestige or quietly refuse them to appease wealthy human parents. Politicians seize on the tension, framing it either as a civil rights struggle or a threat to human heritage. The environment, too, feels the impact. In regions devastated by climate change, hybrids adapted for survival often outcompete human settlers, leading to disputes over land and resources. Hybrid-led communities emerge, self-sufficient and proud, but sometimes viewed with suspicion by surrounding populations. And then comes the most unexpected twist: fertility. When hybrids were first engineered, scientists claimed they were sterile, a safeguard against uncontrolled population growth. But scattered reports begin to surface of second-generation hybrids, children born naturally, carrying unpredictable combinations of human and animal traits. For geneticists, it's a revelation. For policymakers, it's a crisis. What started as an experiment has become a permanent branch of the human story. The question now is not whether hybrids belong, but how many different kinds of human the world can truly hold before it changes beyond recognition. At the core of hybrid creation lies a marriage of three once separate frontiers: synthetic biology, precision gene editing, and artificial gestation. On their own, each was revolutionary. Together, they became the blueprint for a new kind of life. The first step was identifying the exact genetic sequences responsible for specific traits in animals, those that give a peregrine falcon its unmatched eyesight, a polar bear its heat retention, or a dolphin its oxygen efficiency. For decades, sequencing an entire genome was slow and costly. But AI-driven genome mapping transformed this process, scanning billions of DNA pairs in hours and flagging relevant sequences like a search engine combing the internet. Once isolated, these genes had to be integrated into the human genome without disrupting essential functions. Here, CRISPR-Cas9, an advanced successor to the original CRISPR, served as a molecular scalpel. Instead of making a single cut, it could weave in entire gene clusters, guided by predictive algorithms that modeled how each insertion would interact with existing human DNA. The challenge was not just adding new traits, but ensuring they expressed in harmony with human development, avoiding dangerous mutations or cellular rejection. Artificial wombs became the silent partner in this process. Instead of implanting genetically modified embryos in human or animal surrogates, scientists grew them in bioreactor pods. Every aspect of the womb environment, temperature, nutrient balance, hormone exposure, was monitored and adjusted in real time. If a developmental anomaly appeared, it could be corrected mid-gestation by altering gene expression through precisely timed biochemical signals. The process also required solving a problem of immune compatibility. In nature, species boundaries are reinforced by immune systems that reject foreign DNA. Researchers bypassed this by engineering regulatory buffers in the genome, synthetic segments that acted like diplomatic passports, allowing animal genes to integrate without triggering immune attacks during fetal development. But these triumphs came with unsettling questions. Was the hybrid's DNA purely a product of nature or a piece of intellectual property owned by the corporation that designed it? Were they human enough to be granted full rights, or a new classification altogether? Legal systems struggled to keep pace. In some jurisdictions, hybrids were registered as patents before they were even born, their very bodies treated as corporate assets. In the labs, the science kept advancing, faster, cleaner, more ambitious. In the streets, the debate raged over whether this was progress, or the first step toward rewriting what it means to be human. The world had grown used to hybrids, if not accepting them, then at least adjusting to their presence. But all that stability shattered in the span of a few weeks. It began in a small coastal hybrid community where residents started showing unusual symptoms: sudden fever spikes, violent muscle spasms, and rapid respiratory failure. At first, doctors suspected a regional bacterial infection, but lab results told a darker story. A previously unknown virus was attacking hybrids, and hybrids only. It exploited a protein receptor unique to their engineered genome, a receptor originally introduced to improve cellular oxygen efficiency. In humans, the pathogen was harmless, incapable of binding to any cell. In hybrids, it spread like wildfire. Mortality rates exceeded 60% within days. The panic was immediate. Quarantine zones were erected around affected cities, patrolled by armed security. Hybrid families were forcibly relocated to containment camps for their safety, though many saw it as imprisonment. Rumors spread faster than the virus, that it was an act of bioterrorism, that rival governments had engineered the pathogen to sabotage hybrid integration, or that the corporations themselves had released it to cover up deeper flaws in their creations. Violence flared. In human-majority towns, fear turned into aggression. Hybrids were denied entry to public spaces, attacked in the streets, even targeted by vigilante groups claiming to protect humanity. International trade slowed as countries imposed strict travel bans on any region with a significant hybrid population. Inside research labs, chaos reigned. The companies that once proudly showcased their breakthroughs now faced public outrage and government seizures of their data. Black market hybrids, bred without proper genetic safeguards, became a nightmare for containment efforts. Some carried unstable mutations that allowed the virus to evolve at terrifying speed, creating new strains faster than vaccines could be tested. Helixus Industries, the pioneer of hybrid creation, scrambled to mount a defense. Their scientists worked around the clock, deploying AI models to design antiviral treatments, but progress was slow. In desperation, they began considering an unthinkable option: altering the genomes of living hybrids to remove the vulnerable receptor entirely, a genetic patch for an entire population. For the first time since their creation, hybrids faced the possibility of extinction. For the first time, humanity faced the prospect of watching its own invention die before its eyes and having to decide whether to save them or let nature, however unnatural, take its course. The virus did not care about politics, but politics dictated every step of the response. While some governments locked down hybrid communities behind armed barricades, others opened their borders to receive refugees, risking their own stability to prevent mass casualties. In underground tunnels, abandoned warehouses, and hidden laboratories, a resistance movement began to form. An alliance of hybrids, sympathetic humans, and rogue scientists determined to find a cure outside corporate control. These groups shared data across encrypted networks, smuggling biological samples in disguised shipments of food and medicine. Their most radical idea was genetic self-modification, using viral vectors to rewrite the DNA of living hybrids, removing or altering the receptor the pathogen exploited. It was risky, irreversible, and in many cases fatal. But for those already infected, it was the only hope. Helixus Industries, under immense pressure, unveiled its own plan, a phased genome stabilization program that would not only eliminate the vulnerability, but also integrate certain hybrid traits into the general human population. Officially, the program was framed as a path toward unity. If humans shared hybrid traits, there would be no genetic line to divide them. Unofficially, it was a desperate bid to maintain control over the technology and prevent it from being outlawed entirely. The proposal split the world in two. Supporters saw it as an end to the hybrid human divide and the only way to prevent future outbreaks. Opponents, including many human rights groups, saw it as the forced rewriting of humanity itself, a dangerous step toward a population whose biology was dictated by corporate and political agendas. Meanwhile, survival strategies grew more extreme. Hybrids engineered for high radiation tolerance and low oxygen environments began preparing to leave Earth altogether, targeting Mars and orbital stations as potential safe havens. These exodus projects were secretive, funded by wealthy hybrid families and sympathetic nations looking to secure a backup plan if Earth turned hostile beyond repair. In the chaos, an unspoken truth emerged. Saving the hybrids was no longer just about compassion. The same genetic innovations that endangered them also held the keys to future survival, for space exploration, for climate adaptation, for diseases humanity had yet to face. Losing the hybrids would mean losing a piece of the future itself. And so, with the clock ticking, the world was forced to decide whether to gamble everything on coexistence or to retreat into the safety of a species that would never be the same again. 50 years after the birth of the first hybrid, Earth is no longer the planet it once was. The crisis that nearly wiped out the hybrid population left deep scars, but it also forced a reckoning. In some parts of the world, humans and hybrids have merged into a single, genetically blended population. Traits once considered non-human, enhanced night vision, expanded lung capacity, heightened reflexes, are now common among children who carry both human and hybrid ancestry. In these integrated regions, cities have been redesigned to match the expanded capabilities of their citizens. Towers curve like the spirals of seashells to accommodate hybrid climbers. Public transportation tunnels run deep beneath the ocean's surface, navigated by amphibious engineers. Markets sell foods tailored for different metabolisms: high-protein diets for feline hybrids, mineral-rich algae for aquatic ones. The word human is still used, but its definition has stretched far beyond its 21st century boundaries. Elsewhere, the picture is less harmonious. Some human majority nations resisted integration, erecting physical and genetic borders to preserve what they saw as pure humanity. In these isolationist societies, hybrids are spoken of as legends, exaggerated into either monsters or martyrs, depending on the political mood. Cross-border tensions simmer, especially where hybrid-led regions control valuable resources or technologies. Hybrid-only communities have also flourished, built in extreme environments where their adaptations give them a decisive advantage. Floating ocean cities, high-altitude colonies, and even the first permanent hybrid settlement on Mars. These places operate under their own laws and governance structures, often rejecting the authority of Earth-based governments entirely. The cultural divide remains, but there is also exchange. Hybrid musicians compose symphonies using frequency ranges only some can hear. Human scientists study hybrid biology to design medical treatments for conditions once thought incurable. Trade flows between worlds that, while different, have learned they cannot exist in total isolation. And in a secluded valley, far from the cities and spaceports, the Chimera child still lives. Now an elder with silver in their hair and the same golden eyes that first captivated, or terrified, the world, they watch over a small community of descendants. Some carry traces of leopard patterns in their skin, others the subtle glint of animal vision in their gaze. To them, the Great Crisis is history, taught in stories beside the fire. To the rest of the world, it is a reminder that evolution is no longer just a matter of time, it is a matter of choice. The age of hybrids began with a single question: what if we could combine the best of humanity with the best of the animal kingdom? For the scientists of the early 21st century, it was a dream of adaptation and survival. For others, it was a nightmare of arrogance and hubris. Decades later, history refuses to take a side. It tells a more complicated story. The crisis taught us that mastery over biology is never just about science. It is about responsibility. Creating life means inheriting its fate. When the hybrids were strong, they were seen as assets, soldiers, workers, pioneers. When they became vulnerable, the world had to decide whether to see them as family or as failed experiments to be discarded. That choice, and the divisions it revealed, reshaped every culture, every law, every definition of what it meant to be human. We learned that identity is not fixed in bone or blood. The hybrids forced humanity to confront a truth it had long avoided. Intelligence, empathy, and community are not exclusive to one species. In accepting them, or failing to, we revealed the limits of our compassion and the reach of our fear. Technologically, the hybrid era accelerated discoveries that might otherwise have taken centuries. Genetic resilience against climate extremes, medical treatments derived from hybrid physiology, advances in artificial gestation, and AI-driven biology that now sustain human colonies far from Earth. But these came at a cost. Decades of mistrust, outbreaks of violence, and the lingering question of whether some lines, once crossed, can ever be uncrossed. Now, in this new equilibrium, we look back at the first Chimera child, not as an anomaly, but as the beginning of a broader species. Their golden eyes, once a symbol of division, are now seen in millions of faces across the globe and beyond. The human story has never been static, but this chapter proved it could bend in ways no one anticipated. And yet, the question remains, whispered in classrooms, laboratories, and political halls alike. If the technology to create hybrids had never existed, would the world be better or worse? Or is the very act of asking proof that we are still grappling with the most fundamental choice of all, not what we can create, but what we should? So here we are, standing at the edge of possibility and consequence. The story of hybrids is not just science fiction, it's a mirror, reflecting our ambition, our fear, and our endless desire to push beyond the boundaries of what we know. We've imagined a future where the lines between species blur, where evolution is no longer a slow dance, but a deliberate design. But in that design lies the ultimate question. Are we wise enough to shape life without destroying it? Are we ready to live alongside beings who might surpass us in ways we can't predict? Maybe the answer isn't in the science, but in us, in whether we choose fear or understanding, control or coexistence. If you were given the power to create a hybrid, would you take it? Or would you let nature decide the fate of life on Earth? Let's talk about it. Leave your thoughts in the comments, share this video with someone who would have an opinion, and don't forget to subscribe for more journeys into the what-ifs that could redefine our future.